All right. And then this thing, when's that going to kick in? Come on. There we
Ready
go.
to.
Okay, and click on that. Okay, I think we got everything rolling. Alrighty, and there we go. Good morning, folks. How y'all doing? See a bunch of familiar names here in the room. John Ashley Smith, Sundered Psyche, Roan, VJ Moore, Feisty Crabman. Let's see here, what else? Got moderator Matt. Greetings everyone from Finland. Hey, Six Gunner, how you doing? Currently painting Plague Marines. Amazing models to paint. They are a lot of fun to paint because they're very like, they're filled with detail, but it's not detail you have to be super fussy about, which is nice. Yeah. Let's see here. What else have we got? Hot and humid Markham, Ontario. It is rainy here. It's been rainy all day yesterday. It's going to rain a good portion of today. The basement is currently got some puddles, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. It happens every time that it rains, pretty much. Good morning from Columbus, Ohio. Teach my wife basic painting techniques for painting miniatures. Nice. Morning from Managua. Wish I could have bought a couple of boxes of those easy-to-build Plague Marines when they were still everywhere. Yeah. Fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, Edmonton. Let's see here. Great Lakes State, damp Isle of Wight. Jonesboro, Gothenburg. Staying in today to build more guardsmen. It's a good idea. I think so. Salt Lake City, where the air quality is 100 worst in the world. Oh, yeah. Now, we've had some days where the fires have been coming down from Canada and making everything real hazy and stuff here, too. So there's that. It's my first time catching you live. Usually just watch this while painting stuff. Well, we're glad to have you, 40-0. I appreciate it. Hello from New Jersey. Just spent 4 hours building and painting Moria, Lord of the Rings terrain. Nice. Let's see. Too humid to prime the Dominion box. Yeah. Good evening from down under. Poland. We got, let's see here. Starting on my first kit ever. Kill Team Cassius. Nice. Glad to make the live stream. Absolutely. Good morning from Smoky, Oregon. Painting some really old scroll tech marines and all-metal motorbikes. Wow. Breakfast cooking in Michigan. Nice. Working my thesis paper while listening to the stream. See, I can't do that kind of stuff. I can't write and then listen to people talk at the same time. It completely, yeah, that's just something I can't do. Like, I can't even listen to music with lyrics in it. If I'm trying to write something, it just doesn't work out. Good morning from Mexico. Waiting on some boxes from Wargames Atlantic to kit bash Weird Soldiers. How fun in Space Weirdos, by the way. I like Space Weirdos quite a bit. I mean, it's within arm's reach. I printed mine out to make a little booklet, which it's formatted to do that, so it's not hard. But I just like the list building because it's... The thing I like about the list building is that you can do what you want to some degree. It's not just like, oh, here, boop, there you go. This is the list you have to choose from or whatever. You can customize things a good deal, and I enjoy that. And then just the combat and things. I mean, it's a very simple little system. It really is. There's not a lot to it. There's not like a big, huge narrative thing. He even says on the scenarios page, thank goodness this is a zine, because it's only 16 pages long. And I don't have enough room to be forced to include more than a few scenarios. And there's just a few scenarios. So, it's $5. So, it's not incredibly deep, but I do enjoy... I don't know, I just kind of enjoy the dice system and stuff like that. It's cool. Glad to make another every other Sunday show and have my daughter with me this time. Hey, Rescued Ruckus, how you doing? Good to hear. Let's see here. Budapest, Hungary. That does sound hot and sunny. 32 degrees Celsius, indeed. Got left coast, Switzerland. High from the West Midlands. Whole western half of the U.S. is covered in smoke. Yeah, that's true too. Let's see. Salutations from Dublin, getting some Stormcast assembled while my darling little Stabgrot has her nap. Nice. Painting the new Beast Snagaboys. Nice. Greetings from the Philippines. Haven't watched your live stream in a very long time because of work. Cheers. Well, good to hear. Got 2 people from the Philippines right there. Let's see. Just finished watching the Tokyo Olympics. Space Weirdos is cool because everything is point buy. Yeah, I like that. I do. Bought Space Weirdos when it was deal of the day. Neat little game on a quick surface reading. Have to dig into it later. Yeah, I like it a lot. Have you tried Conflict 47? Just heard about it for the first time. What do you think about the World War II? So, I own some of the stuff. I have built a little bit of it. I have never gotten to play it, but I want to. A couple of different reasons why. Number one is it's based off of the bolt action rule set. And the bolt action rule set, in my opinion, is a pretty good rule set. One of my favorite things about bolt action, and therefore, Conflict 47, is that you activate by reaching into a bag of dice and pulling out a die. So let's say I still have 7 units left in my army and you have 8 units left in your army. I would throw 7 of my dice, which are all identical, and 7 of your dice, which are all identical but a different color, or 8 or whatever. We throw them all into a bag. And then you shake up the bag and you reach in, you pull one out. Okay, that's one of your dice, so you get to move, activate any one of your units and then do something with it. And we reach into the bag again. Okay, it's another one of yours. And so it's not you go and then I go and then you go and then I go, and then it's kind of random. But if you go a bunch of times in a row, we know that I've got a bunch coming up as well because they're in the bag. So one of the things that does from a design standpoint is it, like, basically, if you think of the fog of war, you never know what's going to happen next, right? So because of that, it's just like, it's always, you can plan for the very next step, and you can't even plan for it. You reach in there, you're like, this is what's happening. Okay, well, cool. I go, or you go, or whatever, and then you reach in, and then something else happens, and you don't know what it's going to be. You can't plan ahead and go, okay, well, I know in 2 turns I'm doing this, or whatever. It's interesting. The other reason I like Conflict 47 over Bolt Action is because I'm not particularly personally interested in playing historical, like straight normal historical games these days, especially World War II. Like, very probably somebody's great-grandpa or something was in that, and I don't want to make a game out of that. But if you make alternate history and it's World War II, but there's like laser tanks and werewolves and stuff like that, I like that. That's kind of cool. That's why I think that the concept behind like Dust 1947 is also cool. That kind of weird World War stuff is interesting to me, but actual World War stuff, actual military stuff, like I'm not particularly interested in much in the way of modern military gaming, but Zona Alpha, which is generally you use modern military models, but you're going into a place where, aliens landed and left a bunch of junk behind and the government has walled it off, so you're not supposed to go in there, but you're going to go in there to look for cool stuff. That's a different story. So, hi from France. How you doing? As you like Space Weirdos, especially the dice system, I strongly suggest checking out Pulp Alley. Yeah, I've seen that before on Wargame Vault. I have not tried it out. The thing is, I don't really have any models that I can use for that particular type of setting. Pulp Alley is designed to be kind of like, pulp, like pulp books, and serial movies and things like that from the 40s and 30s and things like that. I don't really have anything. About that, any kind of models like that, really. Hi from Northern New York, the part that gets Canadian radio and cell reception. Interesting. Looks like rain here in St. Louis so no priming for me today. Yeah, it's been rain. Like I said, it rained pretty much all day yesterday. It's going to rain on and off today. I mean, I wasn't planning on priming anyway. I got other stuff I got to get done. In many situations, I will prime with my airbrush anyway. But sometimes, if I'm working on terrain, I generally want to put that initial prime down with a rattle can, just because I think it sticks better. And terrain has a tendency to take a little bit more of a beating than, say, your miniatures do. So. Let's see here. Kelly, how you doing? Working on a 6mm project. My eyes are not the same as they used to be. Yeah, no, I noticed that mine are not the same as they used to be either. That's very true. Thoughts on combining Zenithal priming with the animal light underbelly thing? How would you go about that? So you still get your Zenithal shadows, but the belly is lighter. Well, I mean, you could do the standard, black and white Zenithal, let's say. And and then either spray just the tummy bit, the stomach part, if you're trying to do that underbelly thing, spray that afterwards, but before you start doing normal paint. Or another option would be to do the black and white zenithal, paint most of the creature, and then, if you can, try to do that underbelly in not just white, but in a color, like whatever the color might be. Maybe it's an ivory, maybe it's a pink, I don't know, something like that. That might work. The issue is kind of dependent upon the pose of the model. Am I going to get it on the legs as well? That kind of stuff. I mean, you could block it to some degree. You could mask it a little bit, but yeah, that's tough. The other option would be to go, again, like I said, just a normal, white zenithal down to black, undercoat, and then spray up the underpart, and then do a thinned down wash to make that underbelly a color that's not just white, if that's what you're going for. But that's the best that I've got, I think. Currently painting role-playing minis for Quest of Yore. Is Quest of Yore that role-playing game from the Onward animated movie? Is it Pixar? I think it was a Pixar thing. But that's cool. Have you looked into Forbidden Psalm Kickstarter? I haven't looked into the Kickstarter, but I did I bought and downloaded the PDF. I know they had a Kickstarter. I thought the Kickstarter was a long time ago. I mean, because that game's been out for a while, from what I understand. But yeah, I picked up the PDF of the Forbidden Psalm, and I've watched several. I haven't played it or anything, but I've watched several of the battle reports that Ash has been doing on Guerrilla Miniature Games. He's been doing a bunch of the Forbidden Psalm stuff, so I've watched some of those because they're generally really short. Like a lot of battle reports are like, oh, this is going to be an hour and 45 minutes or whatever. I think the last Forbidden Psalm battle report he did was less than 20 minutes, which I think is cool. Love the look of World War II of weird World War II stuff, but haven't found a rule set or minis that really work for me yet. I can see that. Love your videos. I've learned so much about painting. Thank you. Well, absolutely, Kachow. No problem. Thank you very much. I can't play Silent Hunters. My granddad was sunk and killed by a U-boat. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. That's the thing sometimes we don't think about. Like if you're playing a historical game like Civil War, maybe, like American Civil War, it's unlikely that any people were in the Civil War at this point. If you're going to be playing something like, I don't know, like Ancients, Visigoths versus it's unlikely that, you know people like that. But there are definitely certain conflicts in some games where that's a thing that, that potentially your grandfather or great-grandfather or something like that, my wife's grandfather was a Marine Raider in the Pacific Theater, and so it's just, it's one of those things. It's just a personal thing. I'm saying, if you like to play those games, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, for me, that's my thing. Is Forbidden Psalm the Morkborg game? Yes, it is. Morkborg is a RPG and kind of a movement. You have these different movements in the hobby. Like there's the Inquisition 28 kind of movement. Now you're seeing this Turnip 28 movement, which is kind of like sort of odd, sort of fantasy kind of figures, but using more historical miniatures and then sort of tweaking them and customizing them. And Morkborg is originally an RPG from what I understand, but it's got a very open license, so lots of people can make all kinds of extra stuff, and most of the stuff has been RPG related, but Forbidden Psalm is a skirmish game, fantasy skirmish game. Had too much to drink last night. Ended up in a Star Wars Legion army. Ended up buying a Star Wars Legion army off of eBay. Well, these things happen, I'm a video game designer for my day job, and I'm intrigued by this topic. Nice. Well, for people who don't know necessarily, back a little over 2 months ago, a good friend Vince Venturella, another YouTuber here on YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel, talks about painting, and of course he does Warhammer Weekly every Wednesday night, talking about Age of Sigmar and all that kind of stuff. He and I got together and designed a game, which I do also have within arm's reach, called Reign in Hell, and it came out, like I said, May 28th, end of May, and it's a miniature skirmish game about demons fighting demons. You can buy it as a PDF for $10. This is the print version that you can get. It's print on demand. It's got black and white insides. But, there's artwork and stuff too. It's not just text. I can find pages, but, there's like things like this going on and whatnot. Anyway, so it's a fun kind of game where you're playing between, generally your cabal is between 7 and 10 miniatures, and they're demons, and you're fighting over the remnants of kind of a ruined hell, and you're trying to, take over hell and bring it under your control and things like that. You can use whatever kind of miniatures you want, tons of different types of things. But we designed the game in we started in about October of 2020, and we launched it at the end of May. And it's, if you're looking to get it, it's you can go to raininhellgame.com, and it's rain, REIGN, not rain like it's been raining for all day yesterday. But it was a situation where I had the idea and I knew what I wanted to kind of do with it, and I knew that I could do the layout and the art direction and all that kind of stuff. And I knew Vince is the game designer for the most part. Like, he's got the background in doing that, math and all that kind of stuff, the strategy stuff and things like that. So we worked together as a good pair to do this, and it's turned out really well, and it's sold well, and we've been real happy about it. I'm not going to lie. It's also, we've had an advantage in that we've both been doing YouTube for I've been almost 9 years now since I launched. It'll be 9 years this upcoming March. And he's been doing it, I think, just a little bit less time. So we've got an audience that we can, talk to, whereas a lot of people can come up with a great game design, but without being able to get it out there, it's kind of difficult to sometimes get traction. So I guess I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about today about, how you can kind of get into it, a little bit more of the technical stuff. Again, I'm not particularly a designer. It was a lot of, this is what happened, a lot of it, is I would say, I think that our, activation scheme, I don't want it to be you go, I go, and I'm like, I like this game, but I don't like this part of it. I like this game, but I don't like this part of it. And it was a lot of going back and forth and saying, what I was looking for, and then Vince going, all right. And then Vince kind of sitting down and say, well, what if we do this? And what if we, and then coming back, because we would meet every Thursday night online and stuff, and he'd be like, what about this? And then, yeah. So the activation scheme's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it. I was talking earlier about Bolt Action's activation scheme. You're reaching into the dice bag. I didn't want to go that direction, but I did want things every turn to be a good deal different. So what happens is that, let's say you've got 6 demons currently on your in your cabal, then you roll at the beginning of each turn. You roll 6 d12s, and then you basically order them from highest to lowest. And then let's say you have 12 and your opponent doesn't, well, then you get to move during the 12 phase, and then there's the 11 phase, and then the 10 phase. And so, you count down that way. If you don't have a die in the 9 phase, but your opponent has 2 dice in the 9 phase because they rolled 2 9s, well, then they get to move twice during that phase. And then, so it works that way. But it's knowable. Like the dice are not necessarily linked to a specific model, but you look at it and you can see that they've got 2 9s there and you've got no 9s. So when you do have a 10, you have to think he's going to move at least or activate 2 models in between the next time that I get to move, and it every turn, so it's not hidden in a bag. But in that situation, it's more, things are frenetic and weird and random, but it's on the field and we can kind of see it, and we can see which way the wind is blowing. Whereas in a World War II type game with explosions and smoke and all that kind of stuff, reaching into the bag and just pulling out the next thing, it makes more sense. Like, figuring out your activation and why it does what it does, I think, is really interesting. As opposed to just like, well, let's just do it however you go and then I go. That's fine. And in some games that makes sense. Don't get me wrong. But in some games it's also interesting to be like, okay, cool, we're going to figure out a way to make it so that the activation actually kind of makes sense within the realm of what's going on in the fight. That kind of thing. So I ordered my copy of Rain and Hell about 2 weeks ago, got my physical copy about a week later. I was surprised it came so fast. Yeah, so back in June, when we had to update the rule set, to get to be able to sell the new print version, because we had to make some changes to it, we were originally told, oh yeah, because you have to, when you want to get something printed, so we worked with a company called one bookshelf. And one bookshelf owns a whole bunch of different websites, including wargamevault.com, which is where our game's available, but also Drive Through RPG, which maybe you've heard of if you're into RPGs, and a whole slew of other different websites. But they are all websites that you can go to basically make it so you can sell PDFs through their website, and you can also, they do print on demand. Well, when you want to do the print on demand, you have to get a proof sent to you so you can look at it and go, yep, and then you say, cool, do it. And then you can turn it on and activate it. Well, when we had to get a new proof done, because we'd made some updates to the book after the game had launched, I said, when we send this new file to get the proof, is it going to screw up the sales of the old version? And they were like, no, it shouldn't. Well, it immediately took the print version offline. And so we had to wait until the new version came around, and it took 15 days until we got the new version. Now, previously, when we got a proof, it showed up way quicker. So we were like, all right, so yeah, 15 days without being able to sell. We could still sell the PDF, but you couldn't sell the print version. It was really annoying. This was back in June. So, okay, fine, great. It finally shows up. We're able to turn it back on again. That's great. So we're prepping for Gen Con, because we're going to have it for sale at Gen Con at a booth. And I'll tell you more about it when we get closer to Gen Con, which is mid next month. But we're going to be selling it through a booth at Gen Con through a retailer that I know. And so I wanted to have a bunch of copies to be able to take to Gen Con. So if you'll be at Gen Con and you don't have a copy of it and you want to get it and not pay shipping, keep an eye on the Twitter and stuff. Anyway, so I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to order 40 copies of it now so that we have them, because it might take a long time. And I'm not going to pay the most for shipping, because when you pay the really high-end shipping, like, to get that proof, we paid the highest shipping we could, and it was almost $100. And it still took 15 days to get here, which was incredibly annoying. So we paid the cheapest amount possible to get these 40 books shipped, and they shipped in, we ordered them and we got them in 6 days. It was just, I'm like, come on, seriously. Well, so you don't know. That's the downside, I guess. If there's a story to be told, it's that you don't know. Man of Action says, are you doing a minis range for the game? No. It's a model agnostic game, a miniatures agnostic game, and it's about demons. And there are tons and tons and tons and tons of demons out there. I keep saying this, I've been saying this recently. If we had made the game about battles between robot squirrels, there's not a lot of robot squirrel models out there for you to use, so therefore we would probably have to make a line of robot squirrels. But we're making the game about demons, so you can get, Games Workshop makes demons, Reaper makes demons, WizKids makes demons, zillions and zillions of different people who do STLs. If you're into 3D printing or got a friend who's got a 3D printer, there's so many different places you can get demons from. And one of the things that's been really interesting about working in a model agnostic style game like this is that, number one, we don't have to, because right now it's real hard, honestly, even to get sculptors. And then once you get sculptors, it's real hard to get actual stuff made, like, models. Like, if we were just going to get sculptors and say, okay, here's a bunch of STLs, that's one thing. But it's only for the people who have access to a 3D printer or a friend with a 3D printer. If we want to actually make miniatures, resin, metal, whatever, plastic is probably outside of our price range. We could do it, but then there's a whole bunch of upfront costs to be able to produce these miniatures. Then there's also the shipping stuff all over the world and all this jazz. And so that's why we went with the concept of a book that's either PDF or print on demand, because this print on demand can be done. The company that we go through, which I said before is One Bookshelf, they have a print facility in the United States and one in the UK. And hopefully they'll get one eventually more other side of the planet. Because then that'll make things a lot easier. But at least the fact, like, if you're in Europe, you're not getting a book shipped to you from, like, Ohio or whatever. You're getting it shipped to you from the UK, which is, well, it's Brexit and all that stuff. And I don't know a lot about all that jazz, to be perfectly honest. But it seems to be doing relatively well as far as people that I've talked to that are like, oh, I'm in Scotland and I got it, like, really fast. And so that's great, So, but yeah, we don't see ourselves doing a miniatures line for the game. At some point, we may make some support STL files, maybe, or maybe for the next game. This is the next thing too, is that we designed this game. We're planning on making another game. They'll come out again about roughly the same time next year, late spring, aka late May, early June. We want to kind of make a game every year. and it won't be a sequel to this. It's going to be, and so far, the only things we've released so far is it's going to be sci-fi, because we've had a lot of people ask about, like, well, there's no shooting in this game, and I like to shoot stuff and whatever. Okay, so the next one's going to be sci-fi, and it will be predominantly focused more on, like, kind of, it'll have the ability to play adversarial, but it'll be more focused on solo and co-op a little bit. Oh, also, we're making an expansion for this, which should be coming out hopefully this month. It's all done as far as the text, but it's in proofreading right now. We've got an actual professional proofreader proofreading it, which, lesson learned. If you're going to make a game, especially if you're going to be getting it printed, get it professionally proofread. Don't just be like, give it to your friend or your roommate and be like, hey, can you check this? Get it actually professionally proofread. There's places online you can do that. It's a super good idea. Let's see here. Let's see here. Rain and Hell is my favorite activation system. I'm not just saying that because you made it. I think it's a fair and balanced system. Yeah, it turned out really, really well. I was really happy with the activation system. I really dug it. All rules are mini agnostic if you're brave enough. Just like all pizzas are personal pizzas as long as you believe in yourself. But yeah. Let's see here. Greetings from Detroit Nerd Bunker. Finishing my last Cursed City minis today. The zombies that I think are boring, so thank heaven for contrast paint. Yep, no, I totally understand that. Where are the demon models in the book from? Some of them are really neat. If you go to the website, rainandhellgame.com, or actually just go to snarlingbadger.com. That's the Snarling Badger Studios is the company that Vince and I have formed to keep making these games going forward in the future. So if you just go to snarlingbadger.com, there is a news post or blog section or whatever, and one of the titles is something like, where'd you get that model, or something like that, and that has a listing of all the different miniatures that we used in the book. So these images that are in there, like this one on the back here, these are 3 3D printed miniatures that I had printed by my good friend Game Format. And then I painted them and photographed them against a white background. And then we found this guy online, his name is Scott, from artistsempire.com. And then he digitally painted over and added in all the smoke and the fire and the sky and the grit and all that stuff. So all the images that are in here, if you go and look at this image right here, that is a model from Archvillain Games that was 3D printed that Vince painted, and then we sent the picture on a white background to Scott over at Artist Empire, and then he digitally added in all the fire and the smoke and all that stuff. So basically all of the images in here of a model. Let me find another good one here. So like this one too. Like those are 2 models that I had printed, and then I painted them and then photographed them and then worked with Scott and said, I kind of want some like dead trees and the sky should look like this and blah, blah, blah. And then he did amazing, amazing work. If you look at White Dwarf a couple months ago, White Dwarf number 465, I believe, White Dwarf actually contacted him and had him do a bunch of paintovers of a bunch of GW stuff, and then he has this like 5-page article in there, and he even said he has like a tutorial about how to do it and stuff like that. He uses a program called Procreate on the iPad, and it's very cool. So yeah, we were really glad to work with him, and now he's doing work with Mantic as well. So he's been we're glad that we got in kind of on the ground floor before he got super famous and stuff like that. But yeah, it was really super cool, fun work to do like that. My wife overheard robot squirrels. She's running to get her wallet right now. We are not making a robot squirrel game. I mean, we're probably not making a robot squirrel game. I mean, I don't know. Plans may change. You never know. The guy that made Zona Alpha also says a cyberpunk skirmish game. Yes. It was called Hardwired, but it turns out there was some other thing that was also called Hardwired, or there was something else, and so now I think he's changed the name. His name is Patrick Todorov. I forget what the new book is called, but I own the old book, so it's a collector's item. Can you tell us a little bit about the expansion? Yeah, so it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be designed for solo and co-op play, and it will be you taking your cabal, or you and your friend both taking your cabals, and you'll be fighting against. It's a 6 scenario story, and instead of most games where you like roll to see what scenario you're going to play, or you pick a scenario or whatever you're going to do, this expansion is designed to go, you play from scenario 1 and try to make it all the way to scenario 6. It's a story, basically. Excuse me. So, you're not going to be playing against other cabals necessarily, because it's very difficult to write rules that are robust enough, like an AI, you know. So the concept in video games is you're playing against NPCs and they're run by the computer, and it's usually referred to as an AI, or an artificial intelligence. And it's basically just a very expansive set of rules that says when the human player runs over there, then get behind cover and do this and shoot and blah 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 and whatever and all that kind of stuff. And then you can, you know, the bad guys you're playing against in Half-Life aren't thinking, even though they seem kind of smart. It's just better AI than, you know, back in the day when you were playing Pac-Man. So, and when you're having to do this on a tabletop, the rules have to be, you can't have millions of rules or even thousands of rules or even hundreds of rules. You have to have X amount of rules. So it'll be you as the players in your cabal playing against more kind of like beasts and like simpler like they're not going to have relics, they're not going to have essences, they're not going to have like special abilities. They'll have some special abilities, but they're going to be simpler kind of creatures. It's like more like hordes of creatures that you're fighting against and stuff like that, because the AI, the rule set, is kind of controlling them. But yeah, it is a story where you start at, you know, scenario 1, and then you complete that, and you do scenario 2, and you just kind of go from there. And again, you can, you know, build your cabal as you go along in those 6 things. But yeah, it's going to be what we call it's going to be pay what you want. So Wargame Vault has the ability to charge for obviously PDFs and stuff, and you can also have PDFs for free. But they also have a setting as a you know, a designer, whatever, publisher, you can say pay what you want. So if a person's like, I just want to download it for free, I don't want to pay anything, cool, you can do that. But if you're like, hey, you know, I appreciate the work, here's $2 or something like that, you could do that as well. And then the upside to having it through a company like Wargame Vault is that if your laptop falls into the river, you know, because you're by the river, and you lose all your PDFs, you can just go back to Wargame Vault and log in and then just download all your PDFs again. They're like saved in the cloud, you know what I mean? Because it's part of your account. Whereas, and this is something to think about, you know, if you decide to start getting into game design, is that if you want to go PDF route, which is a smart way to go, no shipping, no printing, I mean, not on your end at least. If the people who buy it want to print it, you know, and do something like this, or put it in a binder or whatever, that's cool. But the other thing is that if you decide, okay, well, I'm going to just make it so that people PayPal me directly, and then I will email them the thing, right, the PDF. There will be times when you are asleep and the other part of the world is not, and they'll be like, where's my thing? I just, you know, because people expect to be like, I paid for a thing and I get the thing now, unless it's something that's being shipped, right? If it's electronic, they expect it real quick. There are services out there that will also allow you to do that automatically while you're asleep, but a lot of them, to be perfectly frank, they're just like sending it out. Well, now when that person drops their laptop into the, you know, lake or whatever, they're going to have to email you back and go, hey, I bought this, here's my receipt, can you send it to me again? And that's a pain in the butt. Whereas if you work with a company like Wargame Vault, Drive-Thru RPG, other people like that, they take care of all that. They take care of chargebacks. They take 30%, you know, but we were planning originally on doing this all completely ourselves, and then we went through and looked at a bunch of different solutions that we could try to get to work with our website provider, and it was a whole thing. And then finally we were just like, let's just do it through Wargame Vault, and we've been real happy with it. Not only is it they have a lot of extra features and it's really nice that way, but they could also do the print on demand, which is also really nice. And they can also, it's like a marketplace. People can go to, you know, Wargame Vault and just do a search for whatever and find stuff that they maybe wouldn't have found otherwise. I mean, do people do that a lot? I don't know, maybe. But if you start to sell well, then you get up on the, what do you call it? The bestseller list. Like, we've been the top of the bestseller list since we launched the game back on May 28th. So that's been really cool. And that's driven more sales. People who don't know who either Vince nor I are from YouTube and they haven't seen any of our videos, they come to the website and they go, well, this has been the number one for the last 2 weeks. I suppose I should probably check it out, and that helps sales as well if you can get there. So a robot squirrel game would be nuts. Oh, Arthur. Oh, goodness. Is the Rain and Hell expansion the Ranges of Shadow Deep of Demonic Skirmish? Maybe. I mean, not that thick, certainly no. But it's like I said, it's going to be like a kind of a solo co-op thing. Because we had a lot of people ask about that, obviously, because of the pandemic. And I think that solo play in miniatures is becoming a bigger thing, solo/co-op. It's kind of difficult to do one or the other. You generally are like, this is solo, but it's very, very simple to be also co-op as well. So, yeah. Let's see here. I have a massive file store on DriveThruRPG. One bookshelf I have is a phenomenal system. Yeah, I mean, the web design is it's kind of old. It's getting there, but they are planning on working on updating it. You are seeing like they've got links at the top where they're like, hey, want to check out in beta what the new stuff looks like? So I'm looking forward to that eventually. But otherwise, yeah. What kind of budget did you allocate for Rain and Hell? Well, we mainly only just paid for artwork. So we paid for the front cover. We found a person who I'd been watching on Twitch who is an illustrator, and they do commissions, and I reached out because I really liked their pen and ink style, and I said, hey, and we worked together on that, and they did this great cover. I mean, I did the logo. So here's the thing. One of the benefits that we have is that I've been a graphic designer for a quarter of a century. Like, I've been doing this for a while. So I was able to do basically all the art direction, the layout, I did the logo, like I did all that stuff. And a lot of people who are getting into game design are designers, game designers, but not visual designers. So if you've got a good friend who's a visual designer and maybe you want to partner with them or something like that, or or you pay them directly, however you want to work it, there's lots of options there. But in this day and age, people don't want to look at a book that's just straight, like we did it in black and white because it's cheaper and we want it to be inexpensive, but they don't want to just see like a single column and it makes, it looks like you did it in Word. They want something that's a little bit more, but on the other hand, not crazy. You know what I mean? Like, I've talked to a bunch of people who don't like the Necromunda books from Games Workshop because the background texture is so dark. We have a background texture here, and sometimes we even have little splatters and things like that in the pages, but we did not want it to take away from the text. So having that kind of extra little features, those extra little graphical things, really does help and makes it look fancier. So basically we paid for the cover, and then we paid for we did 10 pieces of artwork with Artists Empire, where we took pictures and all that kind of stuff. Those models, obviously, we had to kind of pay for the models and things like that. But going forward, we're now also paying for a proofreader, which is super important. So yeah, people asked us, they're like, hey, why don't you do this as a Kickstarter? And we were like, because it didn't cost that much for us to do. Again, if we were going to be printing a whole bunch of them traditionally, and they were going to sit in a warehouse, and then we had to fulfill them and ship them and do all that stuff, that's a ton more upfront money. I really like the concept of, like, do a PDF. Now, here's the thing, though. I will be very fair with you. We sold a lot more printed copies than I thought. It's a lot more printed copies than I thought, because you give the option of, like, you can either buy the print version or you can buy the PDF version. And it's a $5 difference, $10 for the PDF version, $15 for the print version. Now, for $15, you also get the PDF version. We threw it in extra, for free, because we're like, well, why not? But we're astounded at the number of people who bought the print version. Because you're not only just paying for the print version, but you also got to pay for shipping and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit more expensive. But we kept the book cheap too, because we're pretty terrible capitalists. But the concept is basically that it's a little bit more work to get the print version up onto places like One Bookshelf and stuff like that. But if you can pull it off, I would definitely suggest it, because there's still a lot of people out there who like print version. So, if, Space Weirdos, a project like this, it's 16 pages. You couldn't even get this printed through One Bookshelf. Their lowest amount of pages they can print, I believe, are 18 pages. But they also don't do the stapling on the side anymore. They do what's called perfect bound. Perfect bound is the kind of glued flat edge, the binding that you get here. They can do perfect bound from 18 pages, allegedly up to 1,200 pages, which would be a massively thick, huge book, but they can do that. So Casey from Garsky Games couldn't have got this printed through One Bookshelf. Just wouldn't have worked. But you could do that. I would suggest trying to set that up because you'll sell more, very possibly. And it's interesting. They can even do hardcovers too if you want to go down that road, and they can do fancy color on the inside and all that kind of stuff. But then the cost goes up quite a bit. Color on the inside, like our book, if we would have done a color inside, it would have, I think, easily tripled the cost. The cost of the book, not necessarily how much we charged for it, but it probably would have doubled, at least so there, yeah. There's that. There are no robot squirrel models. That's a double-edged sword. See, there you go. People talking about robot squirrels a lot. Will you include a robot squirrel expansion for Rain in Hell? I'm not sure. I don't know. Probably not. Mice and Mystics has mice and rats, but no squirrels. Yeah. Interfacing with the layout artist is a chore. I usually have to go back and check everything since I assume so much knowledge of the game. Yeah, that is an issue as well, which is why if you can do the layout yourself, great. But I understand that it's not everybody's cup of tea. That was a big benefit that we had, is that I've got a background in graphics and design and layout and all that kind of stuff, and so and I've got access to the software because I have the Adobe junk anyway. So yeah, I used InDesign. But if you're looking for a good design software that's not Adobe, it's not crazy expensive, Affinity, AFFINITY, Affinity Publisher, I think is what it's called. But Affinity has a line of 3 different programs. There's like Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, and I think it's Affinity Publisher. And Affinity Publisher is also supported by One Bookshelf. And that costs like $60 like once. I don't even think they charge like yearly for it. So if you're interested in getting some, design software to kind of do this, Affinity Affinity Publisher is a pretty good way to go. Morkborg is a particularly interesting example of design layout choices. That's also very true. There's a big difference between, like a very, very simple, this is what we did, like with Word kind of thing. Or if you look at Forbidden Psalm, for example, on Wargame Vault, it is crazy layout, like very kind of indie sort of weird, like every spread. A spread is when you open a book, right? So like here is a spread in here's a spread in Space Weirdos, right? Well, this spread, if this was the Forbidden Psalm, might have a blue background on these pages, and then the next spread that you open up might have all black and the text is in white, and it's crazy stuff like that, which is interesting. It's fun to be able to also be experimental if you want to go down that road. That's cool too. Yeah. I love PDFs, but quickly browsing pages on physical book is more easy for me, at least. And that's what we've been finding. I mean, I personally love PDFs because I can do very quick searches to find words that I'm looking for. I can also carry around an iPad with 30 or 40 different rule sets on it. But I do understand that people like print as well. And I like print to some degree, but I'm totally fine getting a PDF and then being like, maybe I get the print book on that. I will buy far more PDFs than I will the print stuff. And to be perfectly frank as well, especially in Wargame Vault, those, the majority of the people on Wargame Vault are PDF only. And the reason is because it's a little bit more work. Not a ton more work, but it is a little bit more work to design stuff for print. When you design stuff for print, you have to build into your design, like, you see how the artwork goes right up, and I'm not even talking about the artwork, the drawing, but like the color here goes right up to the edge of the cover. Well, they can't print right up to the edge of the cover. So what they do is when they print this cover, there's actually extra left over. So I had to design extra, texture, background texture, another 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, something like that. And that's referred to in the printing industry as bleed. That's the extra stuff that's over the edge. And then what they do is they put the book all together. with slightly larger paper, and then the last step, after it's been bound and everything's ready to go, is they take these massive giant cutters and they actually cut off the edges, zip, 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 on 3 sides, and now it looks like the print went right up to the edge when actually it went up to a point and stopped, and then they cut it off. So you have to add in bleed, and it's not just on the covers as well, it's also on the inside. You have to add in the bleed, like having this, again, you guys can barely see it because I've made it very subtle, but there is a texture. And I don't mean a physical texture, but like it looks kind of like I've printed paper onto the paper. It's not just white, right? And that's just to give it a little bit of visual interest, but you have to have that bleed all the way around. Anytime that there's a piece of artwork that goes off the edge of the page, right? So the piece of artwork goes off the bottom of the page, like, and the side of the page here, and that is, you have to make the picture bigger, and then they trim it down. When they're doing the final trim. So there's extra little steps and things like that you have to know a little bit, but they have instructions and information and all about that in their knowledge base and their publisher resources on one bookshelf, because they want you to be able to make a bunch of books because they make money every time that books get sold. So they want you to do that. So they have a bunch of that information, but it is a bit of extra work. So, it's not for necessarily everybody. I've started to move away from owning digital media in general. Access to software and content can be taken away so easily. PDFs are probably more difficult to take away, but I understand what you're talking about. Like, I'm still not a big fan of like buying a movie like on iTunes. Like, I'll rent a movie on iTunes. In my mind, that's like, back in the day when you used to, video on demand. It's basically, so I'm going to want to rent this movie, but I don't want to buy the movie through iTunes, because what if in, I don't know, 10 years Apple is gone? I don't know that that's going to happen, but let's say something happens. I prefer, if I'm going to own a movie, I still prefer to own it on Blu-ray. So, yeah. Now, who's to say in 10 years the Blu-rays aren't gone? So, it's hard to say. I understand that Vince did most of the rules hammering, but how did you work out the activation system in Rain and Hell? I basically kind of was like, and this is very different for me. Throughout most of my career, let me back up. Okay, so I read this book a long time ago called Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson. And in it, there's a character named Randy, and Randy is a programmer, and he works like in Silicon Valley and whatnot. And it takes place, like, I think in the 90s. And at one point in the book, and this is stuck with me for years and years and years, he talked about the difference between elves and dwarves. So in business, elves are like the bosses, the managers, and the people who come in, and they're the idea people. They come in to the conference room, and they're like, all right, we're going to do this. It's going to be great. It's going to be this and this and this and this. And we got these ideas, and it's going to be awesome and great. And then it's to the dwarves to figure out how to actually make that work. So the elves are the lofty, ideal folks, and the dwarves are the people who are actually working in the mines, getting the gems and the whatever, So throughout most of my career in business, well, in marketing, whatever, web design, all that kind of stuff, I've generally always been a dwarf. And it's a situation where salespeople come in and go, okay, well, we're going to, we've talked to the client, and we're going to do this and this and this and this and this, and then I will have not been in the meeting, and I'll be like, okay, well, number one, first thing you mentioned is impossible. That's just not a thing that you can do on the web. Second thing, it would be better if we did it this way just because of this. And it's a situation of the idea people not talking to the people who actually have to do it. And so I've always been a dwarf. In this situation in Reign of Hell, I felt a little bit more sometimes like an elf, in that I would go to Vince and go, all right, so I got this idea. And then it would be kind of up to him to actually make it work. And the activation was sort of like that. It was a situation of, okay, well, I want it, like, I don't want it to be reach into a dice bag, but I like that kind of thing. I don't want it to be, I move a model, you move a model, I move a model, you move a model, we just alternate back that way. I'm like, I want there to be something, and I'm like, and maybe it's like you throw some dice, and then that's every turn, like that's your order, because I've played a bunch of different types of games, like back in the days, Car Wars. You had these activation phases. You had 10 activation phases, and depending on the speed you were going at, that's the activation phase in which you'd activate. And if you got to a high enough speed, you would eventually start to go in multiple phases. If you were doing 100 miles an hour and you were playing a game that, like, eventually they made it into 5 phases, you'd have to move twice, because you'd be moving, if you're only moving 10 miles an hour, then you only got to move like a half move in one of the phases, because originally there was 10 phases, and then they tried to simplify it to 5 phases, but then slow cars had to, it was a whole thing. Anyway, my point is that activation is kind of important, and I think a lot of people sort of phone it in, but we sat and thought about it for a long time. And I basically gave Vince as much feedback and ideas as I could and what I was looking for, but I couldn't like nail it down. And that's what Vince was very good at, is taking like the weird, crazy ideas that I had and saying, okay, let's. Now, this is not to say that Vince didn't also say, I've got some crazy ideas as well, and then we implemented those as well. It wasn't just me like on a high saying, hey, Vince, do this. It was very collaborative, and I really enjoyed working with Vince on this, and we're really looking forward to getting started on the next game, which we're going to hope to start probably in September. Soon. September, I think. Amongst my hobbies is print and play board games. So many print and play designers have no idea about bleeds, book registers, punch tolerances. No, that's very true. That's very true. I've been a graphic designer, worked in print shops, including a book manufacturer, for most of my adult life. Nice, Courtney. Yeah, I've worked predominantly, like lately, I started in print and then I've been in web for a long time, but I've still done print on and off here and there. And print, though, like print on demand is amazingly different than it was even 10 years ago, especially 20 years ago. But all that being said, print itself doesn't change a ton, whereas web design is vastly different than it was from when I started, by a lot. So, found some undead Vikings that are a perfect aesthetic for my first Rain Cabal. Nice. Is there any sales metrics you could share? Week 1 versus average week? So definitely, like that first. I would say that, okay, so we launched on the 28th of the month, and then this may have 30 or 31 days. May has 31 days, doesn't it? I think so. I would say that probably we sold at least a third of how many we've sold at this point in that first 3 days. We may have sold higher than that. It might have been almost half. Maybe not. So there's a huge initial spike. Now, the reason for that, if you're not a YouTuber and don't have a whole bunch of subscribers and things like that between Vince and I, you're not going to necessarily see this huge spike on the first. But we planned ahead. We did like a week worth of like weird cryptic social posts and all this stuff, and let people know that something was coming on May 28th. May 28th, we put a video on Vince's channel, on my channel. We had sent out some review copies here and there to some other YouTubers and things like that. A bunch of stuff. There was a huge spike of people buying it on that first weekend, which we were super, super stoked about. And then it does kind of start to taper, and you get this sort of long tail, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. A person who's got basically like not much social media reach, not much of that kind of stuff, you're going to put it out there, and it's going to be hard to get people to know about it. That's the hardest part, probably, if you don't already have. Like, one of the benefits of, having a big YouTube channel is that you have people to tell stuff about, and this is something that we were able to do. And all it really took was just working on YouTube for 8.5 years, and for nearly the last 6 years, putting out a video every single Friday. It's not a lot of work. Just it's simple, really. All you got to do is just build up a YouTube channel, and there you go. It's like cheating, really. But that's the idea, is that if you were getting into game design, one of the things I would tell you to do is to honestly try to start growing yourself on social media. If you design a game in a vacuum, basically, or you and your friend, or you and your whatever, and you decide, okay, boom, and when we put it out on, let's say, wargamevault.com, it's going to be very difficult without paying a bunch of people to talk about it, or putting out a bunch of ads, or doing something like that to get any traction, because it's a big marketplace, But if you start now painting models, putting them on Instagram, you start now talking on Twitter about game design and starting to build a following that way, even if you get 300, 400, 500 people to follow you on Twitter or something like that, or whatever, or Instagram or something along those lines, and you build that stuff up, you start to build that kind of following, and then when it's time to launch, you've at least got those folks you can kind of say, hey, you've been following me, I did this thing, at least go check it out. Maybe if you got some friends who might be interested in it, let them know about it, share it, whatever. I mean, that just coming out of nowhere and just going, haha, I made a game, that's really not going to get anybody's attention. It's very, very difficult to get people's attention, and it may be a spectacular game. But yeah, I mean, I will be very frank that the reason that we've sold as many as we've had, and we've done pretty well with it, is obviously because we had the marketing background between me working in marketing for a long time, also us both having, good sized channels and all that kind of stuff, and being able to talk to those folks who like what we do and figured, well, if I like what you do, I'm probably going to like the game the two you made. So that's a big deal. That's a big portion of it. Another big portion of it is that the game didn't suck. Like if the game would have sucked, a bunch of people would have bought it and been like, ugh, yeah, and then that would have, boom. But people like the game as well. People have been on Reddit. There's a subreddit for Rain in Hell. There's 2 different Facebook groups. We set up a Discord, but we have the Discord. That's fine, but it's not. Somebody else didn't set that up. All the other stuff's other people set up. We didn't set up the website. We set up the website. We didn't set up the Reddit. We didn't set up the Facebook groups. That was other people doing that. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw I retweeted from the Snarling Badger Twitter account just recently, earlier this week. Someone named Skirt made basically a board game box for Rain in Hell, that they could keep their game in, and 2 cabals and the dice and the book and the whole deal, and they had it printed and the whole. It looked amazing, stuff like that. Someone made a wooden box to keep their cabals and their dice in and everything like that. Had the logo on the front and all that. It was just amazing. So it's amazing to see that stuff. So yeah, the marketing behind it, the fact that the book was well laid out and had cool artwork in it, and the fact that it's not a terrible game, all those things obviously kind of helped and worked together, which is nice. I wish I would have played Car Wars as a kid. Yeah, we used to play Car Wars every Friday night when I was in college. We didn't go to bars and talk to girls. God forbid, no. So yeah, we played a lot of Car Wars. It was a lot of fun. I am patiently waiting for the new 6th edition of Car Wars. It's one of the last Kickstarters that I've done, and obviously it's going to be slow because of the pandemic and all that. It's done, but now they're trying to figure out how to get it here to the United States because it's in China, and good luck. Just buy a boat. That's at this point, right now, shipping between China and the rest of the world is amazingly slow and incredibly expensive. So another good reason to make your books PDFs, because then you don't have to worry about shipping. Speaking of activation, in Rain in Hell, how is the beast intended to activate? Do you roll separately? Does it steal 12s and 6s from each player? Can you give the scoop? Basically, it activates on the 12 step and on the 6 step. So what it means is it's as if the beast got to roll 2 activation dice just for itself, and it rolled a 12 and a 6 every turn. So it activates on the 12 step, and it activates on the 6 step. That's how that works. It doesn't steal. I think it's a wording issue there that maybe needs to be tweaked a little bit. But you're not the first person to ask that question, actually, recently. Unless you're the same person who asked this question recently, then I just saw it again. But yeah, I'm not sure there. So yeah, it's a situation of the beast in that scenario activates on step 12, which is the first step, and then also activates on 6, which is the mid of all of them. I sometimes get PDFs, then pay to get them printed into a booklet at Office Max. Yeah, that's the thing, is that you can do that, and that also is probably going to work out pretty well for you, and you're not going to have to worry about shipping and all that kind of stuff, so it kind of works out that nicely that way. If it's a small enough book or a short enough thing, then you can even do it at home if you want to, if you have a printer. We got a laser printer, so this is laser printed. I don't. I was gonna say I wouldn't know. I don't know if you would do it with inkjet, but you could. It's just that because everything's double sided, inkjet sometimes doesn't like double siding so much. But yeah. How do you balance a game? Tons and tons of plays? To some degree, yes. It's... Unless a game is incredibly simple, it is very, very difficult to balance. And there's no mathematical way to do it, particularly. Math gets you to the point where you start, but if you're looking at a game where you're like, okay, well, we have these stats. You have move, you have life, and you have combat. Okay, those are all numerical things, and if that's all we do, we can get probably kind of close. That's going to make a kind of a boring game. Well, so we put in some special abilities, like this special ability and that special ability. But those things don't have a numerical indicator, right? They just are like, well, and so you kind of have to like, go, I think that this and this are balanced, and then it's playtesting a bunch, which is what we've done, and to try to figure out, how to make things balance. And I would say that there's probably, well, number one, I would say there's no such thing as perfect balance, or even really good balance. Sometimes in actual gaming, there's not really balance in the world. Let's just be perfectly honest on that. But yeah, it's a situation of playtesting that gets balance done. If you look at a game like chess, even chess is not perfectly balanced because technically white gets to go first, and from what I understand, that means that white has a tendency to win just a tiny little bit more sometimes or whatever. But the reason that chess is balanced is because both sides are exactly identical and everything is, you know what I mean? So but that makes chess an interesting game. That makes a miniatures game not so interesting. So, it's a lot of playtesting is the word I'm looking for. Kickstarter, best way to result. We didn't want to do Kickstarter for a lot of reasons. There are a lot of people out there who are using Kickstarter to build hype. I don't agree with it, frankly. If you don't have the money to produce this, then that's the perfect reason that you use Kickstarter. That's why you use Kickstarter. I have this idea. I have this thing. I can't do it without raising money to be able to do the thing. Great. That's exactly what Kickstarter was designed for. When you're a company that has the money to be able to produce the thing, and you just do a Kickstarter just to basically build hype, then I disagree with that. I think that's a bad play. That was the thing. When we released our game, in the video that I did on YouTube, I was basically, I talked about the game and all this stuff, and then I was like, okay, and so Vince and I are really excited for you to be able to check this out when the Kickstarter goes live in a couple of months. And I was like, no, I'm kidding. You can get it right now. Because I can't tell you how many times I've been like, this sounds like a super cool project. And then they're like, yeah, it's on Kickstarter in a couple of months and you'll be able to get it next year. And I'm like, no, I don't care anymore. You know what I mean? Impulse buy is an important thing in marketing. And so the Kickstarter thing is this sort of impulse because oh, look at all the extra crap you'll get if the stretch goals go to here and here and here. But then, you'll wait 2 years until you actually get it. And that's, it's kind of a bummer. And again, like I said, if you are a company that makes a product, a widget, a whatever, and this is not we could afford to pay for the art up front that was going to go into our book. There was basically no other real, we had to pay for the website, hosting and stuff like that. So there were things that we paid, up front, but not a ton. And there was no reason for us to do a Kickstarter on that. So for that very reason, we just decided there's no reason for us to do it that way. But I know a lot of people who are like, yeah, I have it all ready to go. It's all, we've got the money. Everything's cool. Now let's do a Kickstarter, because for some reason, especially within tabletop gaming, news sites will talk about a Kickstarter for a game, but they won't talk about a game that just comes out. If a game is going to come out, just hey, this game has been released, and people are like, okay, great. And the news won't talk about it. But if a Kickstarter for that game, I don't know why. It doesn't. It's just the same thing where everybody likes to talk about conflict in things that are going on, and that's a super there's all this new conflict. Oh, there's this drama, and anyway, that's just me being an old man yelling in a cloud. Balance schmalance. There you go. Knowing what you do about game creation, what are your concerns for the upcoming Kill Team? I would say from what we've seen of the cards, the stat lines, I keep calling them cards, but they're the data sheets, whatever they're called. Because I don't think they're going to actually sell cards like they did with Warcry. I don't think so. Anyway, but the data sheets things. My concern is that models are going to feel very samey. When you reduce down the number of stats, there's a weird fine line. Our game has 3 stats. You've got health, life, sorry, you got move, and you've got combat. And those numbers just changing a little bit changes things, but it's not the biggest of deals. But then there's also the special abilities, and the special abilities are really what's add flavor to the different types of demons, right? And then the ability for you as the player to be able to customize your demons by adding relics and essences and titles eventually, if you can pull that off, and it's great. So from the cards that we've seen so far that aren't the ones that come in the main box, like the Krieg dudes and the Commando guys, but they've just showed off here, oh, here's some like regular, normal 40k people, and here's their data sheet. And I don't see a ton of flavor in the special abilities and all that kind of junk. So my concern is that maybe things might feel a lot samey. You know what I mean? I don't know. We'll see. It'll be very interesting to find out. Let's see. I've read hundreds of historical books on battles, and there isn't really a simple example of equal forces. Yeah, no, in real war, there's never equal forces. That's just not a thing. I mean, really, I've always been told that as a general or whatever, a leader, you really don't want to go into battle unless you outnumber the opponent 3-1, because everything else is like, oh, maybe it won't work. But if you outnumber them 3-1, you're very likely to win, right? So, yeah, but sometimes you don't have a choice. You got to go into battle whenever you got to go to battle sometimes. I heard one game designer say good balance is basically being able to look back and see what you could have done differently to do better. Yeah, I can see that to some degree. I have to start by myself. What's the best way to trust my instincts and let go of regret? To not be so scared because, I only have time for a weekend once a month. I'm not sure I know what you mean there, Alexander. You mean like for painting? Or something else? I'm not sure. Kickstarter is a big marketing event, but running one is painful for sure. That was the other thing, too, is we didn't want to go down that road. I know that there's a lot of, you have to get them to okay it, and you have to wait for it to be approved, and there's back and forth and all that kind of stuff. And again, if you are doing this because you need to raise money to be able to produce the product, that's exactly what crowdfunding is for. And I'm not anti-Kickstarter. I don't like Kickstarter when companies that could just produce the thing and put it out don't do that, and they do a Kickstarter instead. I'll say it, Cool Mini or not, they need to stop that, frankly. I'm against it. And there's other ones as well. Honestly, big props to Mantic, because they've been doing it a bunch, and then when they made Kings of War 3rd edition, they were just like, no, we're not doing a Kickstarter for it, we're just putting it out. And I was like, hooray, hooray. I did the Kickstarter for the new Hero Quest. Supposed to be here this fall, but no news so far from Hasbro. That sucks. Yeah, well, it's technically not a Kickstarter that you did. See, this is the thing that's interesting about Hasbro and Hero Quest. Hasbro was like, well, we can't afford, right, we can't afford just to make Hero Quest and put it out there because we don't know if people will be interested in buying it. BS, okay, number one. You know that people want to buy Hero Quest, and you guys could have just put it out in stores and not even said anything, and people would have lost their minds and bought it, right? Fine. So there's that. Number two, they're like, well, we don't want to do Kickstarter because you got to pay fees to Kickstarter, and then that would lose us some money, and we don't want to do that. So instead, they spent the money to be able to build their own version of Kickstarter. It's called Hasbro Pulse, if I remember correctly. So they built their own crowdfunding service just for Hasbro stuff, and then they crowdfunded Hero Quest and expansions and blah, blah, blah. So they basically built a clone of Kickstarter so that they could then raise money for Hero Quest, and now who knows when it's going to come out. Now, admittedly, pandemic. So I'm sure if there was no pandemic, it would probably have been showing up when it was supposed to show up. But one of the things about Kickstarter is that you're supposed to talk to the people who and maybe Hasbro doesn't realize that. So yeah, that's kind of a thing. The absolute last thing you want to do is go to war on equal footing if you have any other choice. Yeah, no, definitely. If you're fighting fair, you're doing it wrong. Yep. But we're talking about a game, and games are supposed to be fun. And so in that situation, that's why you try to at least get some sort of balance or something akin to it. But yeah, in real war, no. Kickstarter is pretty great for creators of 3D printed minis. I don't understand that one either. Unless it is a situation of I want people to prepay for the stuff that I'm going to design so that you have the money now to work on it, I could see that. But if you already have the stuff designed, and I've seen that too, where they're like, hey, this is this huge pack of STLs that we're going to produce, and the stuff's all done. So then my question is, why are we doing a Kickstarter for this? Why don't you just release it, and then we'll buy it, and it'll be great. We won't have to wait or anything like that. Generally, you don't have to wait too long with those. But then the only thing that it does is that if I make a whole bunch of money, then we'll do some more stretch goal ones and crank those out that I haven't done yet. There's that too, I get. But yeah, I don't understand that. In my mind, again, if you're like, I have a bunch of sketches, but I have not taken the time to actually sit down and 3D art them, right? That's the technical term. Then I can understand it. Especially if you're like, I have a day job, I want to do this. These are all my concept sketches. This is some stuff I've done in the past. If I can raise this much money, then I can take a sabbatical from my job, quit my job, whatever, just do this, get this stuff done, blah, blah, blah. That I can understand. But if you're like, I already have all of these dungeon tiles designed and ready to go, let's do a Kickstarter, I don't understand. Again, other than the fact that you're trying to, basically get a marketing buzz for that, it doesn't make any sense to me. Let's see here. Kickstarter's become a bit of a marketing tool now. Yep. Let's see here. I funded HeroQuest and regretted it immediately, I must say. I got to be honest, too. Yeah, I didn't do HeroQuest because I never really played the original, so I wasn't one of those folks that had the nostalgia for it and all that kind of stuff. That being said, I have done Kickstarters before where I've done it and then I've been like, I'm not sure now. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. It's been a while. It's been a good long while since I've done that because I've cut back on Kickstarters a good amount. Hasbro currently has a 3-foot Galactus on Pulse for crowdfunding. So my question is this: are they showing the sculpt or are they showing drawings? Like if they're showing the sculpt off, then they've already made it. Even if it's just a prototype, they've already made it. And they're like, hey, look, giant 3-foot Galactus. And you're like, hey, cool. Why don't you just produce those? No, we're going to do a Pulse thing. And you're like, no. But if they were like, we have this idea to make a giant 3-foot one. We have an idea of how much it's going to cost. In that situation, if you haven't already done it, even a company as big as Hasbro, you could be like, this is almost a little bit more like a pre-order to see if people care. Because there are times where, like going back to earlier days of Kickstarter, when Steve Jackson Games did the Kickstarter for the new version of Ogre, which came in this massive box. It weighed like 27 pounds. It was, and I'm not kidding, it was massive. It was absolutely, it was 27 pounds, that box. That's what it said on the FedEx thingy when I got it. The reason that they did a Kickstarter for that was because Steve Jackson himself did not believe people wanted a new version of Ogre. So they kind of designed the rules and tweaked the rules, and then they had ideas of what they were going to do, and they were like, we're going to make it out of cardboard, but it's going to be a big thick cardboard, and then you're going to have like your main ogre is going to be like this big, is where it used to be like a little chip on the board and you moved around. And they had all these plans and ideas, and they were like, maybe people will be interested. And I think that they put it up, and their goal was for $40,000 or $60,000, and they raised just shy of $1 million. So they were like, oh, people are interested. But they screwed up the Kickstarter pretty bad. Didn't realize it was going to be a 27-pound box, so they lost most of their money on shipping and blah, blah, blah. And so they've learned since then. But now, like, every time they put out a new Munchkin, it seems like that there's a Kickstarter for it. And you're like, it's Munchkin. You don't need to put out a Kickstarter for it. You know how to do this. This is your 600th different version of Munchkin. But I totally got it with Ogre, I guess is my point. They had the money to produce Ogre, but they didn't necessarily know if anybody cared. And so in that situation, I can kind of see that there. They were basically convincing Steve Jackson this is a thing people want, which it was. And Car Wars, the new version of Car Wars, they could have just afforded to just do it instead of doing a Kickstarter, but I think maybe because it's an old game, I don't know. I mean, they're updating it, changing it. I don't know. I'm on the fence. Do not take out a mortgage to start a game company. Listen to Matthew Sears, a game producer. But yes. Getting into the business is hard. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Don't get into the business. And then what I say with that is, I mean, don't quit your job and decide, I'm going to start a game company. Don't do that. Do it on the side. I still got my day job. I mean, I have 3 jobs now because I have my day job, which is Milk Can slash also Game 4, but we're getting Game 4 moving again, and we're heading in that direction. But we're still just doing regular business stuff for clients and things like that. Been doing that all throughout the pandemic. I've been working there for 5 years. Day job. Then this, Tabletop Minions, second job, right? And now third job, Snarling Badger Studios. So if you just decide, like, I think it's a way easier thing to start out by creating games and being kind of indie and building from there, because a couple of different things. Number one, your first game is almost never going to be a real banger. Like, you're going to learn things. Like, we've learned things from Rain in Hell. You know what I mean? Now, this is also not our first rodeo. It's me and Vince, our first rodeo together, but Vince has designed games before. I had a small little game company way back in the 90s and early 2000s, and we created a couple of things. So this is not us completely starting from scratch. So start from scratch, make some PDF games, use some like stock art that you can get, whatever, and all that kind of stuff. And, maybe sell 50 of them. Cool. That's pretty cool. 50 people gave enough of a crap. But build over time. You can't go from like 0 to 60. You got to start out and accelerate and kind of go from there. But yeah, starting a game company from scratch, very difficult. Absolutely. That's why you kind of ease into it, at least in my opinion. There's so many different aspects. Like, it used to be so incredibly difficult to become an indie game designer because there were no PDFs. Like, when we first made our first game, my good friend Peter and I, when we first had Snarling Badger Games, before Snarling Badger Studios, me and Vince, our first game, there was no PDF in 1992. Like, so we had to sell like a small printed version that we printed and slid into, you remember the plastic jewel cases for CDs, right? So we would buy CD cases, empty CD cases with no CDs in them, take the black plastic part out that the CD snapped into, and then we would get our books printed at Kinko's and slide them in there and then close it and then take them to this place here in town and get them shrink wrapped. And so we sold it, and people would be like, computer game? You'd be like, no, it's not. It's the best box we could find to fit it. Because we had been told by somebody earlier on, don't ever put your game in Ziploc bags because stores hate Ziploc bags. Well, as it turns out, game stores aren't real big into CD cases either. But nonetheless, and we produced a couple of different games going that direction. And it takes time to kind of go down that road. But nowadays, like I said, if you want to start something, you can produce a game on the computer, get it all ready to go, make a PDF, send it to a place like, One Bookshelf, whatever. People can buy it all over the world. It's just way quicker. There was no Twitter, there was no social media in '92. Like, the only way we got people to learn about our game was to go to Gen Con and to get a booth. Back then, you could get a booth, an entrepreneurial booth, when it was still in Milwaukee for $150, which was still a bunch of money in the early '90s. So we would do that and stand there and talk to people and hand out flyers, and it's just, Nowadays, it's a lot easier to get down that road and be able to get more kind of global reach very quickly, I think. Well, quickly is a strong word. Easily, yes, you can. Still difficult to get people to pay attention because there's so much out there as well. So there's that. They should have just done Car Wars because Gaslands killed it by coming first. To be honest, I think they decided to start pulling the trigger because they saw what Gaslands was doing. They saw what Gaslands was selling like crazy, and they were like, geez, maybe we should do Car Wars again. And then what they've done with Car Wars, because I got to play it, they had their own convention, Steve Jackson Games. They finally, after 40 years in business, finally had their own convention in 2019. And I went to Austin to go to the convention and to visit some friends. It was kind of a twofer. And so I got to play a beta of the game, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, it reminds me a lot of X-Wing, Star Wars X-Wing. It has a very Star Wars X-Wing vibe to it. It's very different than back in the old days, where you had an 8.5 by 11 sheet with a bunch of stuff written on it, and you wrote things down and this and that, and you moved the little cardboard thing. Now you've got like plastic cars on clear plastic bases, and you've got some kind of rulers to sort of move them, and you have a little gauge in front of you that's made out of cardboard that you track like how much damage you've taken and how much how tired your tire damage is and all that stuff, and it's got a very X-Wing vibe to it, which I'm not against. it was funny to see other old grognards like sitting around the table there playing and just being like, this isn't the same as it used to be. But it wasn't that it wasn't fun. It just isn't the same as it used to be. And, that's just the way life goes. If you're really wanting to jump into something full-time, make sure you have 2 months of however much it takes to survive for you. Oh, that doesn't even sound like enough, honestly. Yeah, there's no unemployment for failed businesses. I got to be honest, again, just if you want to start a new business, don't get rid of your old business. You know what I mean? Like if you got a day job and you want to start a new business, you've got time at night. You know what I mean? Sleep a little bit less, honestly. Like I don't want to get into it about the whole concept of hustle culture and like, oh, you got to grind 24/7. I mean, you don't have to. But if you want to start a business, I think that the worst thing that you can do is just like quit your job and decide to start a business. You know what I mean? Starting a business, doing both at the same time, burning the candle at both ends for a bit, whatever, seeing where it goes. Because if it starts to take off, then you know at some point, okay, now I can quit my day job, let's say. But to quit your day job and then start your business, I don't think that's a good idea, frankly. I'm a bit risk adverse, so there's that. But, you do you. Best way to make a small fortune in games is to start with a large fortune. Yep, that joke has been going around for quite some time in game design. Let's see. Keep convincing people they shouldn't do their own Kickstarters. There is plenty of money there. More for me. I mean, if you want to do a Kickstarter, do a Kickstarter. That's fine. I don't like him, and I generally won't pull the trigger on a Kickstarter if I think that they're just doing it for the marketing. Like, I'll be like, I'll wait till the game actually comes out and I can get it in stores. I've done that a bunch of times, actually. Like, there's like, here's the Kickstarter for this thing. I know that they already have it done, ready to go. I'll just wait till it comes out in stores and then buy it then. But that's my personal opinion. Let's see here. Kickstarter, we're not a store. Everyone else, yeah, whatever. Yeah, no, I get you that. Are you going to do a live or video playthrough of the game you made? We're going to do, at some point, a battle report. Vince and I were talking this past Thursday. At some point soon, he's going to come up to visit me and Sam, I think. And then we will probably try to do a battle report when that time comes. Which means I need to find a good board. I want to have a nice themed board. I've got the terrain, but the board itself... I should try to make something. Anyway, but whatever, yeah. So we're going to do that and then film that and put it out there. Now, the next game that we do, one of the things that we learned is that the next game that we do is going to have a battle report right from the get. Like when we launched this game, we had a video about like, hey, what is the game? What is it about? What's it, that kind of stuff. So we did that. But we're going to have a what is the game. We're going to have a how to play the game, not a battle report, but just this is how a turn works. And then we're also going to launch with at least one battle report because we had a lot of people right off the bat that were like, hey, can I see this in the battle report? And we had not thought of that. And we were like, well, but it's the game. So, yeah. So those are things that would be, if you're going to be making a miniatures game specifically and you want to release it, I would definitely try to have all those things, all those ducks in a row when the time comes. When the time comes and you launch it, you can be like, look, here's my website, and there's a video on here that is just an explanation of what the game kind of is, like the theme and what kind of dice you might use or whatever, that kind of thing. It's a skirmish game, small number of models. It's robot squirrels fighting robot squirrels. It's a completely tournament level competitive play, like whatever the deal is. You put all that information in there, make it a minute and a half, 2 minutes tops. Boom. This is the thing. This is the main video that people watch when they're like, I want to know more about this game. They watch it. It's a minute and a half. They're like, cool. Now I have a good idea. If they want to delve deeper, then you make another video that is like, this is how the turn works or whatever. And you could do that. And then if they want to really sit down and watch, then you give them a battle report if you can. And then they get, and again, if you were to like dump all that into one video, people are going to be like, nah, I'm not going to watch a hour and 20-minute video because they're going to see the time right there and the little, thing. So, yeah, instead you split those into 3 different videos. So we will do that next. Let's see here. Starting a small business is tough because you can make enough to survive but not thrive. Paying for all your bills isn't worth it if you're killing yourself 24/7. It's true. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, there are plenty of people out there who are like, there are plenty of people out there who are like, I'd like work in my day job and I want to work on making some miniatures at night. Let's say you're a sculptor, whether it's traditional or 3D. You can do some things here and there. Whatever you want. Maybe you love to paint. Maybe you'd love to play. Maybe you want to design stuff, but you're just doing it for funsies. Whatever. You can do that. Take 6 months off and not work on your game design because you're working on something else. You're building a fence in your backyard or you're whatever. There's all kinds of different things that come up in life. But it's when you're like, I really want to design a game, and you get like this real itch, and you want to go down that road. If you really want to do it, it is best, I think, personally, to stick with your normal day job at least for and until you see what happens. Because I got to be honest, like the money that we've made, Vince and I have made. We've sold quite well for a small indie game, at least in my opinion. I don't know what other indie games do. I have no frame of reference, but I'm like, hey, this is cool. But it's not enough for either of us to quit our jobs. Like it's not, not even close. So, but maybe over time, if once we get to our 7th or 8th game or whatever, it could become at that point a much different story. But you have to start somewhere, But I would say don't start somewhere by deciding I'm going to start a game company and then quit your job. Don't do that. Let's see. I was told by several business guys that basically if you wanted to start a business and just work that business and do no other job, that you need to have enough money saved up to start the business. There's a lot of people that say you got to have you should try to have 6 months of, I don't know. I think that businesses take even longer than 6 months to start to get to the point where it can make enough money to support you. I don't know. It also depends on maybe you have a spouse that makes decent money. So you can kind of go that direction. You see that happening. There's a lot of different things out there, but even just to support yourself, small businesses, especially in tabletop gaming, that's difficult. It's difficult. I hope you realize you made robot squirrels a thing. I've been talking about robot squirrels for the last month or so, but that's just been the example. I talk about. People ask about if we were going to make miniatures for our game, and I'm always like, well, there's lots of demons out there. If we had made a game, and this is also, I think, an important thing to keep in mind. If you want to design a game, you want to design something that's just a book, and you want it to be miniature agnostic. There are so many miniatures out there from so many great companies, so many different STL people. If you've got 3D printing options available to you, there's so much out there, and it's awesome. If you design a game that uses very specific types of models, you can design a game that uses robot squirrels. Well, robot squirrels are hard to find, but sci-fi people, that's not hard. Fantasy, if you wanted to have a game that was just all goblins fighting goblins, it's not hard to find goblin miniatures. You know what I mean? You don't have to make goblin miniatures. You could if you wanted to, but you don't have to. There's goblins out there available for you. So sometimes if you've got an idea in your mind for a game, but you're like, I don't know where I'm going to find the models for it, well, then just tweak what that is. Just say, oh, okay, well, we're just going to make it fantasy. The Forbidden Psalm from the Morkborg folks, that's a very, very specific kind of weird sort of idea behind everything that goes on in that kind of realm of fantasy. But it's basically you just, maybe you kit bash some fantasy dudes. You got a guy with a crossbow and somebody else in some armor, and maybe you make them look a little weird and stuff like that. And that's a lot of the fun of doing these types of games. But yeah, that's how it works. The red robot squirrels are so OP. Robot squirrels versus cat police. Ooh, there you go. I used to think I wanted to design a game, then I realized that I like to tweak rules other people make. And there's nothing wrong with that either. That's a lot of fun. That's a fun hobby, honestly. Sleb says, I worked for a startup. It took us 2 years to break even. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's with people who probably have, maybe even have some, funding from people and, that kind of stuff, whatever you call it, VC and whatnot. They used to say, plan on losing money for the first 3 years. Yep. Let's see here. Single squirrel STL add-on confirmed for the sci-fi game. I don't know. I don't think so. Any advice to start? I would, like I said, probably easiest way to start would be to, okay. So Space Weirdos, I keep bringing this up. This is called what is referred to as a skirmish heartbreaker. I did not know what the term heartbreaker meant because I'm not generally an RPG person. Let me read you right from the beginning of this thing. Space Weirdos is my skirmish heartbreaker. In RPG terms, a heartbreaker is a fixed, meaning, it was broken and now fixed, version of Dungeons & Dragons published by an amateur. in my online circles, a lot of old school Dungeons and Dragons people are discovering or rediscovering miniatures wargaming and starting to write rules when they find that the big name games too expensive or convoluted. So what a heartbreaker is when you take a game and you go, this is a cool game, except that this and this and this are broken. I'm going to fix them, and then I'm going to republish it. Now, you can't obviously call it Dungeons and Dragons. You can't, but there are kind of interesting rules. Like, there are certain things that you can take. Like, if you were like, oh, I can patent it so you can't do alternating activation. You can't do that in rules. You can't patent or trademark or even copyright rules. You can copyright the text that explains the rules, but if I take the idea that you have and just sort of tweak it a bit, change the paragraph all around, make it so that you have to roll high versus rolling low, or whatever the deal is, that's kind of what a heartbreaker is. And legally, you can republish that. So this is taking a bunch of different pieces from a bunch of different games that Casey likes, putting it all together into one thing, and that's what a heartbreaker is. So you could start there, taking a look at some game that you like, simplifying it, adding more detail, whatever you want to do, and then trying to publish it and put it out for super cheap, or maybe even pay what you want and see what people think about it and try to build a community that way and go down that road. Or you can be like, I have this idea, kind of like we did, and we knew that we wanted to build something kind of unique and go down that direction, and you could do that as well. So yeah, that's kind of the way to kind of start, I think. Noob Painter says, sigh, let me sculpt some robot squirrels. I mean, if you want to, don't. Matthew Sears, Moderator Matt says, yeah, don't make miniatures. Moderator Matt, he and a partner used to have a company called Hyacinth Games, and they made a game called Wreck Age, which you may have heard of. And they had, 150 different miniatures that they sold over the course of 6 years or something like that for their game, post-apocalyptic and such, metal miniatures. And I have heard horror stories from Matt about working with sculptors, and not that they're bad people, it's just like so difficult, especially if they're like on the other side of the planet and you're trying to work with this person and the time zones are all different. It's a whole thing, and it takes a lot of work. You can get some amazing looking stuff, and a lot of the Wreck Age miniatures are awesome. But yeah, it takes a ton of work, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of miniatures agnostic stuff, because if there's a bunch of people out there, Patreon folks, Kickstarter folks, all that kind of people making cool STLs, there's a lot of people out there making interesting models in resin and stuff like that. Companies like Cromlech, Anvil Industry, Spellcrow, all these different people making all this different stuff, kit bashing things, doing whatever you want, Reaper, WizKids. There's no reason necessarily for us to, especially because we're making a game that's just basically demons, there's no reason for us to sit down and sculpt new demons to play our game when you could just have the fun. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who are like, I don't know what to do. And that is a thing. Like, we want to try to figure that out for the next game. We are thinking also about doing like a blog post that's like, here's a bunch of different, like we've already done one blog post or like, here's the miniatures that we used in the pictures in the book. We also want to do a blog post about like, if you don't know where to start, like I want to play Rain in Hell, but I don't even know where to look for demon models. We want to be able to like, look, this company makes them, this company makes them, this company makes them, and a bunch of links just to help push people along a little bit. But when I see a miniatures agnostic game, my first thought is like, oh, good, I get to design, or kit bash or figure out what I want to do to build my warband, cabal, crew, whatever. To me, that's the fun part. I understand to some people it's like, no, I just want to buy the models that you tell me to buy so that I know what to use, and that's fine too. Nothing wrong with that. Worked for a startup that had a $3 million loan that disappeared in 6 months. Money is flammable in more ways than one. Yeah, that's definitely true. Let me see here. Rain in Hell Demon Mini Kickstarter. Actually, a guy started a Kickstarter to sculpt minis for Rain in Hell. I forget his name now. I think I have some I'll have to go back and look, because I've got messages between. Basically, someone reached out to me and like, "Hey, I see that you're doing a Kickstarter for miniatures," and we're like, "No." And it's just a sculptor overseas somewhere who was like, "Hey, I really like Rain in Hell. It's very cool, so I'm going to make a line of miniatures for it." And we were like, could you just put a thing in there saying you're not, like, we're not working with you? Because it kind of came across as like we were working with him. which we weren't. We weren't going to tell him, hey, you can't use our name and blah, blah, blah. Because we didn't, like, the reason that Games Workshop gives all kinds of weird names to their models is because it's much more simple for them to be able to go, you can't call this thing because we made up that word. We have, models like Armored Demon or Venom Queen. Those are normal words. You know what I mean? They're not like a proper name like Dave or whatever. You know what I mean? Like Dave the Demon. So yeah, we just basically reached out and we're like, hey, if you could just put a thing in there saying that we're not affiliated with you and you're doing this. And then he was like, oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to. And I'm like, that's fine. So yeah, but there has been a Kickstarter actually out there for someone making, I don't remember if it's still going or not, to be frank. And again, like I said, I don't remember the name. But there is technically a guy out there who decided that he liked the game enough that he just sculpted up demons for, I think he was starting with the 6 main minions, the lesser demons, basically. So yeah, I don't know what happened with that. I don't know if he hit his number or not. I love taking existing rules, adding my homebrewed rules to make it more or less crunchy. Yep, no, I agree. DJ Todd P. Harris, absolutely. I'm just going to start complaining now about the flight stands on the flying robot squirrels. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. They do look weird. Do you realize how hard it is to find a robot demon squirrel? It's even harder than just a regular robot squirrel. Let's see here. There used to be a manufacturer of Rel Partha not far from me in Paris, Ontario. Nice. Trying to find a robot gorilla to use as an empowered Oracan the Diviner model. Not easy. Robot gorillas. Do a Google search maybe for a game called AT-43. Like A as in Adam, T as in Tom, 43. There's a hyphen in between the AT and the 43. And there was a group of robot gorillas in that game that were called Carmans, like Karmans, I think. And you might be able to find those on eBay. And they were pretty cool. They were like full-blown, like almost like silverback kind of gorilla guys, but like they had like power armor on. It was awesome. I don't know, that might work for you. I kind of want to buy Rain in Hell to justify buying the sweet demon minis from Heresy Minis, but I don't really need any more for my pile of opportunity right now. Well, that's fine. Not a problem. Working with people on the other side of the world can be great for fast turnarounds. It can. It can also sometimes be difficult to be able to, like, depending on, like, I need to talk to you, but it's nighttime now, and you know what I mean? Like, if you're trying to have, like, meetings and stuff, that part can be difficult sometimes. Because, again, some people are a bit more night owls, obviously. They're VJ Morph. And other, if you're, like, trying to interface with a business on the other side of the planet and call them during their business hours is not during your business hours or vice versa, so it can be difficult. Dave the Demon is my co-pilot. Nice. Can you copyright Dave the Robot Squirrel? Well, it would be trademark, not copyright, I think. So, maybe. Thanks for your paintbrush video the other day. It really helped. Well, good to hear it. Absolutely. Trying and failing to find cyberpunk goblins for gangs of the Undercity. Cyberpunk goblins. That I would not know about. I own some of the goblins. I haven't built any of them yet, sadly, but I do own some of the goblins that were released for Oathmark, just because I was looking. I had some other project I wanted to do with them. I also have some of the Oathmark skeletons, which are nice because they're skinny, but they can be also a little troublesome because they're maybe a little bit too skinny. It's hard to say. There are robot gorillas in Monster Apocalypse, but they might not be the right scale. Oh yeah, that's true too. Yep. How do you feel about a minis game with official open source STLs? I think it's super cool. I mean, I think that, because who does that? One Page Rules has got, like, the thing that I think is really cool about One Page Rules is that basically you can go there and be like, I'm going to buy the rules and I'm going to buy a bunch of STLs. They're going to get shipped to me digitally, like right now. No shipping costs, no time, no wait, boo. And then I can just start printing. I can go to my Kinko's and get the rules printed out if I want them, like a physical copy. I can start printing some models. I'm very interested in seeing more people doing that. The other thing, too, is that if you want to, you could just go, okay, cool, one-page rule. See, here's the thing. If you wanted to play one-page rules but not use 3D printed models, maybe you don't have a 3D printer or whatever, they're not going to tell you, oh, you have to use these models. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, if you are looking for models, hey, look, we've got a sculptor that we've, chained to a chair, and they've been cranking out tons and tons of models because the one-page rules folks have been making zillions of models. It's been great. So they either have a bunch of sculptors who all work in very much the same style, which is difficult to do from what I understand, or they have one person who just never sleeps. I'm not sure which, but it's very cool that they're able to crank out that stuff. And I think that's a good way to go for those folks. I mean, if it would make us more money and if we had the ability to do it, I could see cranking out STL files for our next game and the next game or whatever and that kind of stuff. So the people who come to us and go, I don't know what to buy, we can go, well, look, we sell these STLs. But the thing is that what we're finding is that, yeah, there's a lot of people out there with 3D printers, but it's still not the majority. The majority of people want to buy, it seems still to this day, the majority of people really just want to buy a bunch of plastic miniatures to put them together. I got to be perfectly honest with you. The 3D printed minis that are in this book, these three in the back here specifically, are 3D printed. They were an absolute peach. They were beautiful. Do you understand how nice it is to not even have to think about mold lines? It is spectacular. Like, I am working on some models downstairs in the basement right now. I've been working on them this weekend, and I'm just about done, and I'm still finding a mold line here or once in a while on a boot or something like that. And I'm like, God, friggin', it's just so annoying. But when you're using a 3D printed model, there's no mold lines. There may be little striation lines here and there, but like mold lines, no. So that's awesome, and I love that. But that being said, and the fact that generally they're put together, like there was a couple of them I had to glue together, but for the most part, a lot of times they're just, those models are together. You know, you're ready to go. I like that a lot. So I definitely see the benefit of 3D printing in that fashion with resin and stuff like that. I definitely do. But I think still the majority of people out there, when they were the people that were saying to us, I wish that you had a miniature line, I know that they were saying, I wish that I could just buy miniatures from you, not STLs. And we just don't have that ability, and I don't know that we'll ever have that ability. And I just don't, again, like I said, I don't know that we need it. There's so many people out there that make miniatures, both already pre-printed stuff and 3D printed stuff, and it just, we'll just make rules. My focus this morning has taken a hard turn from dragons to robot squirrels to demon robot squirrels. Ooh. Titan Forge has one cyberpunk orc. Titan Forge has also got Cyberforge. Isn't that like their sci-fi line? I think so. I plan on making some more bits so that my Gorilla Kit bashables can be made into AT-43 Carmins more easily as well, though that is still in the future. Nice. Ooh, Space Goblins. Do you see print on demand taking over the model market? Indie games making a major push along with 3D printing becoming the norm for us US wargamers, for us wargamers. Do I see print on demand books, or do you mean 3D printing of miniatures? Excuse me. I don't think, I think in the indie market, print on demand is becoming a big deal. But in the regular market, okay. Hang on a second. So I bought a book off of Wargame Vault. I was just going to buy the PDF. And actually, I might have bought the PDF and then went back and bought the book later. But it's called Horizon Wars Zero Dark. And it is from POP, which stands for something. It's short for something. I forget what. Anyway, but it's by Robbie Jenkins. And it is, it's a hardcover, okay? So it's a hardcover. It's like 94 pages. And it cost like a strange number. It was like $27.94. And it's full color on the inside. What they call premium color over at Wargame Vault, okay? But it was $27.94, I think is what it said. And I was like, first of all, that's an odd number. It's technically an even number, but it's a weird number. And so I'm like, well, Well, so I looked it up. So I went into the publisher portal through the One Bookshelf thing, and I figured out the reason that this book is $27.94 is because the actual cost to print this book is $19.94. So basically, they just marked it up $8 to get $8 profit. The thing is that when you work with a company like One Bookshelf, then they take 30% of the profit. So basically, every time one of these books gets sold, the company, or the people who made it, not the people who printed it, but the people who designed it and uploaded it and all that stuff, make about $5.60. But this book costs $28 basically. So the question then becomes, do you need to go, because here's the thing, and I'm sure it's a very cool rule system, but like there's basically no artwork. There's every once in a while there's photos of models, but other than this one piece of artwork on the cover, which is a good looking cover, there's no other artwork in this book. So then like I'm looking at it going, would I, like, you know, would we do color on the inside of one of our books? You know, I don't know. We like the concept of making a book that's inexpensive for the people to be able to buy. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is not a terrible price for this book. It's just then not as much profit for the designer who designed it because the cost was so much higher to get these things print on demand. Now, getting back to the original question, if this had been printed traditionally and they printed 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 of them up front, the cost per unit would have been very, very, very much lower than $19.94. So in that situation, then profit becomes, but then you have to pay up front and you have to warehouse and you have to ship and all that kind of stuff. So there's these options, you know. Is print on demand going to be the way that Games Workshop does it? Never, probably, unless it is, we need to get a really low quantity of this one thing done real quickly. Maybe they'll print on demand, do that, great. But and then they know they're just not going to make much of a profit. But in general, the big companies will always go through traditional printing means, just because then the cost per unit is so much lower. It's very cool to be able to be an indie person and say, I got this cool hardcover with full color on the inside, but the profit that you're going to get on each one of these is much lower than if you would have printed 5,000 of them traditionally and then shipped them out to people and distribution and all that stuff. But then it's, again, like I said, a big upfront cost. So there we go. Don't do it, Adam. Don't do what? What am I not doing? Book fell over. Fishman Gang versus Cat Police. That'd be sort of fun. One-page rules are my go-to for rule systems now. There we go. Making playing 40K and Age of Sigmar a lot better. I've heard really great things. I've read through the Firefight rules, which is, initially I thought Firefight was basically going to be analogous to Kill Team, but it seems like you're still moving in squads, kind of, in that. So I need to go back and look at it again, because I think maybe I misread it or something, but it was like I don't like games where I have to move a squad. I want to move each dude separately, whatever, you know what I mean? And I thought that's what Firefight was, and then I was reading it, and it talked about squad movement, and I was like, huh, but I didn't. I think then I got distracted by, I don't know, bees. Who knows? Let's see here. Licensing official minis for Etsy printing would make Battletech a lot of money. Yeah, potentially. They probably have a deal with whoever makes their metal minis now. Ral Partha? Is that who does it? So maybe they've got some sort of licensing deal and they can't. I don't know. By the way, did I see something recently from Lychee Slicer that there are printers coming with built-in DRM? I know what most of those words mean. Although I thought lychee was some sort of drink. I don't know what Lychee Slicer is. Slicer is generally, for 3D printing, if we're related, then it's the thing that slices it up the model into all the slices. And DRM, I know what that means. I don't know the rest of it, though. Sorry. The fact that local game stores don't run printers 24/7 to sell minis is silly. Many licenses don't prevent you from selling out of a brick and mortar. Some do, but it's only a few. I mean, most local game stores are having a hard enough time just keeping stuff in stock and keeping the bathrooms clean. Most local game stores are like one person. Maybe sometimes it's two. Maybe it's like someone and their spouse. Yeah, I mean, bigger local game stores, I could see them wanting to go down that road maybe, but the thing is that they're not going to be able to charge probably nearly as much as they do. I don't know. That's a good question. Like if a group of 10 goblins from a company that's not Games Workshop, because Games Workshop has a tendency to be more expensive, but a normal company, let's say a group of 10 goblins is $15. I don't know. Could you charge $15 for 3D printing on resin those same 10 goblins from some other company or whatever, some other STLs that are still goblins, whatever? Or would you be losing money, or would you be not making as much profit? I mean, there's a lot of different things in there. Like basically, when game stores are buying something and putting it on the shelf, they are making, in many situations, at least or close to half of the sticker price. So if the sticker price is $30, they're making $15 over it, which means that they bought it from a distributor for probably maybe 10, maybe 12, something like that. So the distributor makes a small slice, but it's volume. That's what helps them out. So like the company that made the thing, they might make $8 off of a $30 thing. The game stores are getting the majority of the money usually, but they're also only selling a couple of those boxes. They're not selling, hundreds of them. So that's kind of how that works. So they're running on a tighter margin, and it's a whole thing. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Because that's the thing. If they're going to make off of a $30 box of, let's say, 10 models, they make $15 off that. Will somebody... Here's the question, too. Will a consumer want to pay $30 for 10 3D printed models? And you know what I mean? And will you still make the same amount of profit? That's a very good question. I don't know. I like the PDFs, but they don't do my not young eyes any favors sometimes. Well, see, I like the PDFs because then if I can blow them up. You just go like that, and then the text gets bigger. I like that, too, which if you do that on the page, it doesn't work. Like I have, you're like looking at this, and you're like, is this text too small? First of all, I tried to make the text a little bit bigger than most other games just because I know people aren't getting any younger. So, and neither am I. But yeah, you can't just be like, zoom in. Like, you've ever seen like a little kid do that on a magazine? Like a real little kid, like a toddler that's been using a lot of iPad, and then they give them like a book, and then they try to zoom in or whatever. It's weird. Anyway. Artwork is important to me. It kindles the imagination and makes the rulebook fun to read. I agree. You need to have good artwork, and you need to have good layout, and you need to have good rules as well. There's probably some good rule systems out there that I have skipped over because I've looked at their book and been like, this layout's not great, and it's just, and there's no artwork really. But yeah, that is important, and it to some people it's a bummer because they're like, yeah, but I just don't, because it seems like it's extraneous, but it is important, just the way it works. Iron Wind Metals does BattleTech. That's who it was, not Ralph Partha. That's right. Picked up a bunch of Shadowrun stuff from Iron Wind a while back before I had a 3D printer. Nice. Any opinions on the recently announced Frameworks Miniatures Prismatic paint line from WizKids? Well, I'm assuming that Frameworks, I don't know the name of it, but I know that WizKids is going to start making miniatures that are on sprues. So WizKids generally right now makes those miniatures like D&D miniatures and stuff like that. They're pre-primed. They come a little blister pack thing, but they are going to start making miniatures that are made out of better plastic than, the plastic's fine. They're okay for those cheap WizKids minis, but they're making better plastic, but then you have to clip them and put them together yourself and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know really much anything else about it. There's a lot of complications when it comes to selling prints. The models themselves really need to appeal to players of some of the biggest games like 40K, or else no one is motivated to buy them. Well, it's not that nobody is motivated to buy them. It's just not the majority of people are because there are very frequently, like, case in point, me. Like, I look at like weird, crazy models sometimes, and I'm like, ooh, I want that. That's going to be cool. But then there are other people out there that are just looking for cheap Space Marines. So, that's fine too. But yeah, for the most part, people are looking for the well-known stuff. But it is really nice to be able to be like, oh, this is a super cool monster that I want for my D&D campaign, and nobody else makes anything like it except for this one person who makes the STL. So I buy the STL, I print it, and now I'm happy. That's a benefit. But the downside is that the person who sculpted it probably isn't going to sell a ton of them because it's such a niche product. But that's the industry we're in, unfortunately. It's a lot of niche products. You've got like one big player in our industry, and then everything else is kind of a niche product. So there's a lot of complications when it comes to... Oh, I just read that one. Sorry. Let's see here. You should talk to... Is it Roby or Robbie? I don't know if it's Roby or Robbie. It's spelled Roby. Yeah. You should talk to Roby or Robbie Jenkins. Sometimes I think there's some really interesting game design industry conversations to be had there. Yeah, I think it would be fun to talk to some other designers and stuff like that in the industry. I think that'd be kind of cool. I'm hoping to be able to talk to some folks during Gen Con. We'll see how Gen Con goes now, but we'll see how it goes. Every time I buy a 3D printed model, I keep thinking that it's taking away from buying a printer for myself. I mean, if you buy a 3D printed model from somebody else and you just go, now I don't have to buy a printer, and maybe the printer is more work than you're prepared to, it is another hobby. That's the thing. Like, that you have to take that into consideration. Do I want another hobby on top of the hobby I already have? I want to, paint miniatures, and that's great, but do I also want to have to print them? Or do I just want to go to my friend and be like, hey, I'll give you some money and you print me these 3 models? Yeah, because they seem to already like that hobby because they already bought the printer and they were running it and stuff and whatever. So yeah, that's kind of the way it works. I was glad the text in Raiden Hell was a little larger, made it good for printing in A5. Yeah, it was a situation of me just like, I would work on the screen, and then I would send a print to the printer, and then I would have to go upstairs to the second floor because it's where the printer is, and then I would look at it and go, well, that's too small. No. And then I would come back downstairs and change things. And then there's something to be said about, you may be designing something for a PDF, you may be designing something for, on the computer, but print it out. Before because you could look at, it looks great on your screen, and then you print it and you go, well, that's too small, too big, whatever the deal is. It's important to print it out and to look at it at the 1-to-1 size, the 100% size it's going to actually look if somebody does bother to print it, or if you're making a print version of the book. And yeah, we went with a slightly larger font than most other companies because I was comparing a lot of like, GW stuff and like Malifaux stuff and everything to like ours as far as font sizes and see what other people are doing. And we wanted to go a little bit bigger because it just makes it easier to read. And I'm old. Rain and Hell made it to Battle Scribe. It makes me so happy. Well, that's good to hear. Yeah. No, definitely. I don't know who did it, but it was very cool to see that. I almost try to zoom in on paper sometimes. Yeah. The artwork in 5 parsecs has made me consider repainting my terrain to match the artist's style. That's very cool. 5 parsecs does have great artwork. So 5 parsecs, if you're talking about the newest version, that's Ivan, I believe his name is Ivan. And he is Nordic Weasel Games is his company, but the most recent version of 5 parsecs is being published by Modifius. So if you go back and look at the previous versions of 5 parsecs, the layout and the artwork are not nearly as fancy as they are now because Modifius got involved, and now the layout's much fancier and the artwork is lovely. Don't get me wrong, I really like it. But it's not like, if you look at a lot of other stuff that he's done, the games are just as cool, but the layout and the fancy and whatnot, not quite as cool. And so that's also a thing that you have to concern yourself with. Like, the previous version of 5 parsecs doesn't look like the new version, but they're just basically an edition change. There's not a lot of huge changes from what I understand between the 2 editions, but they do look very visually different, and because of that, and probably just marketing push to some degree from Modifius, the new one's selling quite well. So yeah, it's kind of the thing. Let's see here. James Hewitt of Blitzbowl fame has a new game coming out soon. I can connect you if you'd like to chat with him for stream some. Oh, I've chatted with James on Twitter back and forth a couple of times. Yeah, he seems like a super nice guy. If you ever do Tabletop Minions Con, will there be a ball pit? There will not. No, not that no, that sounds like a bad idea. But yeah, there has been a Tabletop Minions convention. It's called it's called Tabletop Minions Expo, or TMX for short. We had one in, I think it was 2017, 2018, and 2019, and now the last 2 years, COVID, so no. But we do, I want to have, man, I really, really want to have one for 2022. That will be great. It's very small, generally. I think the last one we had, 2019, I think we had 70 attendees. So it's a very small little thing, but it's a fun get-together, play some games. It's all about demos and stuff like that. There's no tournaments. There's no competition. You sit down and learn how to play new miniatures games with people who are there to show you how to play new miniatures games. And then scratch my nose. All right. Let's see here. I have a bunch of STL files for minis, but no 3D printer. Who knew? Don't know if I'm going to get a printer or what kind. It's true, 3D printing is a hobby in itself. Yeah, it is, definitely. Ivan's older stuff is very printer-friendly, which is to say, like, not a lot of color and artwork and stuff like that. I get that. But But yeah, no, it's very interesting. Game design has been a lot of fun. Like like I said, this is again not my first rodeo. It's our first time that Vince and I have worked together, but both of us have done stuff in the past here and there. He's done more than I have, but it's just we're in a situation now. We're in we're in the part of civilization now where publishing has become a lot easier. Actually coming up with something good is still just as hard as it always has been, but being able to get it to be seen by people all over the world, just like video. Like I've said this a bunch of times. Like 15 years ago, NBC could have not live, videoed to people all over the world at all. Just couldn't have done it. They would have had to have worked with a whole bunch of different, network rebroadcasting in a bunch of different places all over the country. And now here on my dining room table, I'm able to talk to people in Shanghai and Istanbul and blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. And it's great. And it's the same thing with game design. You can kind of get into it and just do some PDFs, very little upfront cost, give it a try. You're still kind of one small little speck out there and amongst a lot of different things. So it takes a lot to get yourself sort of differentiated and get people to find out about it, but that's what social media is for. So I would tell you to start by building up your social media stuff and just start getting into conversations. Don't push it, but get yourself out there, get some followers, and then start working on your game. Start talking about you're working on your game, and then when your game comes out, you've got some people to tell about it. So that's about it. All right, well, it's 11 o'clock over here in my neck of the woods, and I'm going to go downstairs and I don't know, see how the water is. It's not deep. It's just there's little puddles here and there from the rain. And then it's going to be lunch after that. And then some other stuff. I got to get a bunch of work done this afternoon. And then we'll see you tomorrow on Twitch if you're interested. 7 p.m. Central Time. There's a button. 7 p.m. Central Time. I'll be on Twitch at twitch.tv/tabletopminions. And I'll be continuing to work on some models. And maybe we'll see you then. But thanks for watching.